Are you playing champions that make your life harder than it needs to be? Then watch this video and you can say goodbye to those champions. And with that, hi summoners and welcome back to another ProGuides Wild Rift video. Are you ready? Cause we start now. And for our first champion, we have Jhin. So why is Jhin here? Number 1, Jhin lacks DPS, which makes him inherently bad versus tanks. On the other hand, he is quite okay into champions he can literally 2-tap. But how many champions of that kind are around right now and how reliable can he get to those? The answer is, not really often. But if there was one thing I would say the champion is the strongest at, in terms of what this champion provides, it's his laning phase. His laning phase is unironically not that bad. He has great potential to set up things and he can punish the enemy for making mistakes. However, he can barely deal with any of the meta AD carries, in terms of damage and in terms of movement. He is just a sitting duck ready to be collected by anyone who wants to kill him. Also, thematically, he's not so much of a carry AD carry. He's more of a utility-oriented attack damage carry. Setting up fights is something he does very well, be it with his second ability or his ultimate ability Slow. He can engage from range and support his team by doing so as well. Also, since his third ability is a trap on the floor, it can function as a pseudo ward, which gives him and his team a little bit more safety. So let's quickly talk about what this champion feels like. In the very early game, so laning, he feels not that bad and he can actually acquire agency for the jungle role and be ready for any scuttle rotation. However, if he fails getting ahead in the earlier stages of the game, he just turns into some useless lump of a champion. There's not much happening from him, apart from the utility aspect. Nonetheless, if a Jhin gets fed, things look a bit more funny. He can actually 2-tap anyone now, and yeah, that's basically it. But if you're wondering why this champion feels so bad, there's a slight difference in the passive ability of his. If you compare the League PC variant to the Wild Rift variant, you'll quickly realize that he lacks quite a bit of scaling. In the Wild Rift variant, he only gains bonus AD from attack speed, and crit grants him more movement speed. On the PC version, on the other hand, he gains bonus damage from crit and attack speed alike, which if you think about his overall numbers, makes a huge difference. So unless we see some changes to that, I don't think Jhin will come back into the meta for the foreseeable future. Maybe 2.5 will change that, but we'll have to wait and see. And with that out of the way, we get to our question of the day. What is in your opinion the weakest champion of the game? Let me know in the comments below. You can also choose 2. Next up on this list comes a champion who is not really played in that position, however in the recent patch was targeted for whatever reason. It's Senna in the AD carry position, or rather a farming Senna. So why should you not play this type of champion in this specific role? Well, you barely get any souls from farming, which makes it 10 times worse. Even before the nerf, you would never see this champion played in that very specific farming situation. You would always see her paired up with somebody else who farms, primarily a mage or maybe even a bruiser. But Senna as a standalone AD carry doesn't provide anything better than a normal AD carry. So by doing so, you would lose out so much potential and there's simply no reason to do so. So please, if you pick up Senna, play her with somebody who farms. Cause you, poking the enemy, collecting souls and the local gold is more than good enough, and you'll get way more souls anyway. So what exactly does the champion do? It scales. It indefinitely scales into the later stages of the game. And the moment she gets an insane range, she becomes super annoying. And if there's something she also provides in abundance, it's shields. If you combine the Lockout enchant with her ultimate ability, you can completely negate even a Ziggs ultimate. And if you're feeling that you're going to get engaged on and the enemy team has a lot of CC, by casting your ultimate ability early enough, it will cast even if you get CC'd in the meantime. Which means your team and you yourself will get a lot of shielding, whatever happens. But what is the overall goal of the champion? Ideally speaking, you want to pair up a Senna with somebody who farms at all times. The Senna walks around with that person and collects the souls that drop from the minions while collecting the local gold. And if there's nobody to follow in terms of laners, you can even follow your jungle. Compared to League PC, large monsters don't always drop souls, but sometimes you might get lucky and get a few souls from the bigger camps, such as the Crocs, Raptors or Wolves. You might even go so far as to start with the Krug camp if you know the jungler you're playing with. By that, you'll not lose too much lane agency, and you have the option to get a ton of souls from just this camp alone. And if you're talking about ideal matchups, if you have the option to pick this champion into an immobile melee support such as a Braum, you can indefinitely farm him in lane and get so many souls. You'll scale so fast and destroy the enemy AD carry even though you're literally a support. And with that, we go over to our next pick. Gragas, who has been a Baron laner for the longest time. However, to the changes specifically to tank Gragas, it's just so much better as an AP or a support. It simply provides so much more than on a tank position. So what does this champion do if you play him as, for example, AP? He becomes an absolute monster. His combo literally one-shots you from range, and there's not much you can do about this unless you have stasis or flash or maybe even a proto belt. That is until Banshee's Veil is released, of course. For those who don't know what Banshee's Veil is, it's an item from League PC that grants you a magic shield. With this, you block one incoming spell, and with that, Gragas doesn't have an easy time getting to you, because his ultimate ability might get blocked. So in the item department, you'd go for a Rod of Ages into a Rabadon Staff Cap. As much of raw AP as you can get to make sure you really hurt. For the support role, you can debate on going a Rod of Ages as well because it's so cheap and so effective in everything it does, but afterwards you change up the build slightly. You could, for example, go for a Zeke's Convergence to make sure your AD carry, if you're playing with one, is getting more value out of your existence. Also for runes, there's something you have to take in mind. For the AP Gragas variant, you usually go Electrocute, and for the support variant, you go Aftershock. Because if you don't take Aftershock in the bottom lane, or rather in the dragon lane, you will see that your champion is quite squishy even with the percentage damage mitigation on your second ability. Another thing that makes Gragas so hard to pilot, or rather so punishing, is that you have to carefully aim your ultimate ability, as you can mess up a lot if you fail to do so. You've seen it a lot, and you've seen it a lot with Lee Sin's, that if you miss this ultimate or make a major mistake with it, you can decide the entire fight. Which is kind of funny. You have the ability to carry a fight with one button, and you have the ability to fail a fight with one button. And you have to always be aware of that possibility, because what happens after, you'll probably get a lot of flame if you mess up. And in fact, it's easier to mess up than you think it is. But now let's talk about the role of the champion, or rather the goals of the champion. Gragas is a disruptor. He stops the enemy from engaging with this explosive cast and provides a lot of CC. So for example, any type of melee champion that gets close to him gets CC'd and isolated for his allies. Another thing Gragas can do magnificently is looking for engages. With this explosive cask, as I've told you before, he can make or break the fight. And now let's talk about our next pick, Shyvana. Yes, you've heard right, it is Shyvana. And Shyvana has fallen out of the meta for quite some time, and she's not as good as she used to be. If you pick her though, you can force the enemy to play more around dragons, as your champion really scales hard with those. However, it's a double-edged sword. Shyvana's kit basically forces her to play around dragons if she wants to become that super strong champion. Nonetheless, exactly this leads to predictable movements on the map, which then can easily be answered or accounted for. Taking all that into account, since her early game isn't really the strongest apart from her clearing capabilities, she really struggles keeping up with the meta strong junglers. Because if she were to face them in a 1v1, especially if they're invading her, like Lee Sin would, she has no chance of fighting back. But what exactly is this champion doing? This champion wants to scale, and then this champion can either go into split pushing or team fighting. However, with split pushing available, it's more likely for her to go this way. It's just easier and better to pull off in a solo queue environment than having to flip a fight with your team. But there's also something that really stops her from getting so good as a champion. Her ganks are really weak unless she's able to commit her ultimate ability. Most of the other champions have somewhat of a mobility spell that changes their location almost instantly. Shyvana only has her second ability's movement speed, and after that, the only thing she can really do is ultimate in. But if there's something that's really funny about this champion, it's the fact when she actually gets ahead. Let's imagine you get a Cloud Dragon on this champion and you become a speed racer. Running from you is not an option anymore, you'll just get beaten up. And after this happens, she can go into split pushing and just run away from any harm coming her way. And if she doesn't need to run away, you'll quickly realize that she can 2-tip you if she has a Blade or the Rune King already. But reaching that state is actually quite difficult, especially if you take into consideration that the mental of the average solo queue teammates is rather weak when it comes to dragons. Cause don't forget guys, the jungler isn't always the one that will decide if you get the objective or not. There are many other factors in play that will allow him to call for this objective. But for example, if your dragon lane is 0 in 10, the chances are very little that you're actually able to get the dragon. So make sure to don't flame your jungler instantly just because he didn't get a single objective in terms of dragons, because it might be simply not his fault. And after this, we're going straight to our very last pick, and this is Cannon. Cannon as a champion really only shines in teamfight scenarios. You can think of him as a walking bomb that has to walk into you. But now, let's quickly talk about the champion in lane. In lane, he doesn't feel as strong as he used to be. His auto attacks barely do any damage, and his second ability is like literally the only thing that really hurts you. If you pay attention to his first abilities, of course. Because getting hit by those shurikens subsequently really hurts over the course of time. But in reality, once he auto attacks you in the lane when he's close to minions, your minions will actually beat him up and it looks quite funny. But if you were to go for auto attack trades, make sure that your second ability is fully stacked and you can get the auto attack, the mark, and the active part of your second ability. With that, you have an easy and quite good trade. Another thing that feels quite sketchy about this champion is that his only go-to move is to run into the enemy, which can be stopped easily if the enemy team has the champions to do so. Other than that, he might flash and proto build in, but that's basically it. So if you know where he is and you know what he's capable of, and you will have the tools to respond to him, he can't do anything. Obviously though, if he happens to get fed, it looks kinda funny cause he'll just one-shot you. But this happens with all champions that get fed. He's just less likely to get into that state. And that's basically it for today's video. Take care, hit the sub button and catch you tomorrow. See ya.